So hello everyone and welcome to more How Good Are Some of These Characters. I know you've all been wondering, yeah, but where's the Shizuka video? Well, it's been like 4 or 5 days since she's been released and we still have nothing on her wiki page, not even her personal. So yeah, this has to still wait for a bit long. I'm sorry guys. More importantly though, let's go over some more supports that we need to take a look at. And of course, one of the best supports in the entire game still is Madoka. Also highly sought after on a lot of PvE quests, and even in ranked mirrors, she's really good. However, let's go over why that actually is the case. First off, we need to take a look at her personal, because she's one of the very few characters in the entire game that actually has a really good personal. In the sense that it does Axel draw. If you have a personal that gives disc draw, apart from charge draw, then it's actually pretty good. Memoria, there are also some that do monopolize draw. We'll get to it at some point because Ao has that and it's really good. And that is also something that can be really good. But specifically, Madoka, she has been in the game for a very long time, so most people probably already know that she has that sort of personal. We also already know that her stats are not actually that great. I mean, her attack is basically 0, but at least she has some sort of defense, especially with Spirit Enhancement. Now, with Spirit Enhancement, she actually does get quite a bit of defense, which is really good, and her HP is also quite alright. Just don't worry about her actually dealing any damage, but the thing is, it's actually totally fine now that she doesn't deal any damage, or not just now, but in general, it's totally fine that she doesn't deal any damage because she's just there to keep people alive and be that sort of healing defensive support. So what does she bring to the table in that sense? First off, of course, she has the HP restore on her connect, and she also gives MP restore. I know everyone really loves this connect because it gives a massive MP restore on here, and if you do this on an Axel combo, for example, you do Axel draw on turn 1 in a PvE quest, and then you get the Axel combo out, and then on turn 2 you do the connect onto someone. You already give them so much MP that without the other person even doing that much, they might already get to Mario on like turn 3 or something. Like without them really doing anything themselves, which is kind of absurd. But one thing to note, by the way, though, is that this connect does not give any sort of buffs, like staying buffs whatsoever. It doesn't give attack up, defense up, anything whatsoever. It really just gives HP and MP. And the reason I say this is because it means that if you're connecting to someone who already has full HP or who doesn't need the MP, this connect does nothing other than, of course, giving them the disc. And the reason why this is important is because there might be cases where you want to give up on getting a Puella combo and instead keep the connect for some other turn where it's more important. This is something that in general I should mention with healers, with defensive supports in general, that you shouldn't just always throw your connect out immediately to try and do something, but sometimes if you're in a situation where the effect from the connect, like the heal or the defensive buff, whatever it might give, doesn't really do anything, you might want to hold on to that and instead just deal less damage for a turn. Dealing less damage for a turn is totally fine as long as you make sure that you don't leave any space open for the enemy to attack you and kill you. So because safety is always more important than damage when you're playing with defensive supports. Also gives MP restore to some terrible character, we don't really care about that. Next up, we look at the Magia, of course, and since Madoka is a character who can get to Magia rather quickly, mostly because of her Excel draw passive, but also in general because you would play her in Magia team specifically. Let's look at her Magia, which is very important as well. Not only does it give, what is it, like 32.5 MP on Magia level 5 with the scaling, which already like gives you every character in the entire team that you have already puts you on 1/3 of the way towards the next Magia already, which is absolutely absurd actually, and kind of broken. It also gives damage cut for 45% to all allies for 3 turns, which means that if you get 2 of these out, you're already sitting on like 90% damage cut and makes enemies hit for absolute kittens, which also is pretty darn broken. So as we can see, Madoka is actually really awesome. One thing to note though is you basically never want to go to her Magia, her Doppel. She's one of those characters, I think I've said this before actually, basically every single support in the game doesn't want to actually go to Doppel, ever, but you might still want to maybe sometimes unlock their Doppel if there are a few quests where you need to do more damage, but for the most part, it's actually interesting to not unlock Doppel for these characters, like still get them to Magia level 5 so they can go all the way to 200 MP, but not unlock Doppel for them. Which you would do by doing the Doppel unlock quests in the Magical Girl side story, because beating the 3rd MSS of MSS 4, like the last Doppel unlock quest in the Magical Girl story side quests, that is what actually unlocks Doppel. It's just that that is gated behind having Magi level 5, or episode level 5 to be more exact actually. No, it actually is Magi level 5. But yeah, if you still have Doppel unlocked, like I said, it's still fine. There are still some cases where you want to have the Doppel, especially with the other character that we're going to take a look at, who actually does get something special on a Doppel. Because you can still kind of play around it. There's still ways of playing around having Doppel unlocked and trying to only use Magia and not getting to Doppel. There's still ways of playing around it. It's just a lot harder. But if you don't mind it being a lot harder, you can still totally have Doppel unlocked and it's still totally fine. So don't worry about that. What about a Spirit Enhancement though? The thing is, the Spirit Enhancement of these three characters that I'm going to take a look at, not that special apart from the last character. But for both Madoka and Kako, these Spirit Enhancement are not that important, to be honest. It's just that they make them a little bit better at what they do. So first of course we have the regular 4 notes here. I'm gonna stop mentioning these at some point. Status with ailment resistance up, which is very important because one thing that can completely destroy your entire strategy of trying to run multiple defensive supports and just stalling the enemy team is getting hit by powerful status ailments, like for example ailments that bind you, for example, which not only stuns you, makes it so you don't get a turn, you don't draw any discs, can't use Magia or anything like that, can't use actives, but it also makes it so that that character can't be healed. It's not that they can't be healed with just connects, because that's also true, they also can't be healed by connects unless, we'll get to that later. But also if they have a regeneration running on them, which a lot of these characters will have if you're running a defensive stalling team, the regeneration will also not heal them because Bind is a level 3 status ailment, and level 3 status ailments prohibit healing. Similarly to Curse, for example, you also can't get healed if you have a curse on you. But with status ailment resistance, at least you are able to not get hit by these that often, and that's really nice. If you play this together with an alternate Madoka, you're basically laughing at status ailments. At least most of the time. You also get some Magia damage, which is awesome, some charge damage up, some blast damage up. Most characters get at least some sort of disc buff, so these are also not that important. Damage up versus witches. And what does this matter? Because Madoka deals no damage. Same with S-Stock Adept, like chance to ignore damage card. What does this ever matter? Madoka deals basically no damage, and if you're playing this sort of strategy, you don't care for damage anyway. You could be dealing 1 damage each turn and you'd still win in a billion turns, so what does this actually matter? I don't understand. Most importantly though, it gives regeneration MP up, and these two notes are like the only important notes out of her entire repertoire. Status ailment resistance up and regeneration. However, she has a pretty interesting active as well that on most cases won't do much, but in some cases will actually be really good. It's anti-debuff. Basically what this does is if you activate this ability, every single character on your team gets 2 stacks of a buff, and what does this buff do is that 1 stack will be removed whenever the enemy tries to cast a debuff on you, but the debuff gets nullified. So for example, let's say you use this ability and then the enemy were to use, let's say, Meteor, which gives both defense down and attack down. The first stack, bonk, your attack down, the attack down gets nullified, it doesn't do anything. The second stack, bonk, defense down gets nullified, defense down also does nothing. After that you've lost this buff, but you didn't get hit by either debuffs. Awesome. So overall, Madoka is insanely powerful at being a defensive support. Just keep in mind that it deals no damage and it doesn't help others deal any damage. She's purely 100% defensive, so play her 100% defensive, like with Memoria selection as well, with team selection in general. Moving on, we have a girlfriend, we have Kako, who is also very similarly to Madoka, and also that she has personal that has Excel Draw, which is also really awesome. She has the same disc set. She has a similar problem with her stats, even though her stats are even worse. But she has even less damage. Her defense is way worse, and her HP is also way worse. So she's basically like a worse Madoka in her stats even, and Madoka already didn't have that great stats, to be honest. I mean, offensively that is. Of course, defensively her stats were still pretty good, so like I said, if you're playing this on a defensive team, those Madoka stats were actually totally fine. It's just that Kako has noticeably less defensive stats even than that, so that's a problem. Her Connect is rather similar. It also gives HP Restore. However, other than giving MP Restore, which is what Madoka did, she instead removes status ailments, which I usually say that removing status ailments is usually rather bad. If it's something you have to trigger on your turn, because it would be way better if you could just not get hit by the status ailment. It's way better. However, on a Connect, it's actually somewhat interesting, because on a Connect you can use it, especially as a healer, to get rid of other of your character's level 3 status ailments, like Curse for example, to still heal them. So with this you can still heal characters that are cursed, for example, because it removes the curse and then you get healed. Awesome. More importantly though, if it's a character that is bound, charmed, stunned, for example, and they can't act because of that, if they're incapacitated, you can still connect to them and it will clear the status ailment and do the connect, and it will heal them, which is awesome because otherwise you can't do that. If Madoka, for example, tries to connect to someone who is stunned, she can't do that. The game won't let you connect to someone who can't take a turn. However, because this removes those ailments, the game specifically allows you to do this connect anyway, because the game knows that you're going to clear the stun with that connect. Same thing for Madoka. Madoka can also do that. Awesome. But it is specifically important on a healer, because otherwise that person might not be able to be healed, but now that person can be healed. Awesome. Her Magia, which also she's going to use quite a bunch, because similarly to Madoka, she has that Excel draw in there, and you would play her on a defensive Magia team, which means that you will get a lot of Magias out. What does it do with the damage? It gets single target damage, who cares, actually, to be honest. More importantly though, removes those ailments to all allies, not that important, but actually the one thing we actually care about, it gives every ally a 3-turn 15% regenerate HP above at Magia level 5, which is amazing, especially because we're going to stack this. We're going to use a Magia every second turn or whatever, which means we have like somewhere around 30% HP regen each turn, which is actually kind of absurd. Her Doppel does basically the same thing. However, and this is the important bit that I want to mention, her Doppel does have something special. It does remove enemy buffs from the target at Doppel. And there might be some quests where the enemy buffs themselves with attack up to such a high degree that they might actually kill one of your teammates at some point, even if you're playing defensive. So being able to remove buffs and decapitating them, if you haven't seen this animation, it's amazing, can actually be really awesome. What about her SE? Similarly to Madoka, it just makes her a little bit better at what she does. So it doesn't do anything super crazy, it just makes her a bit better. So for example, it gives some defense up. Actually, it gives 2 defense ups, and one of those defense ups is even stronger if you're on critical health. Well, actually, I might have phrased this wrong. You get 15%, and if you're at low health, you get on top of that 30% for a total of 45%. Together with the 7.5 you get all the time. Awesome. You also get regeneration, similarly to what Madoka did every single turn. So just by having these 2 on the field, you're already regenerating a whole bunch of HP on top of the HP you're going to regenerate every turn with the Magia. Awesome. What you also get, you could get a much more Magia damage. Who cares, to be honest? I mean, like I said, the damage doesn't really matter too much on these characters because we're playing them purely defensively. Some blast up, who cares? Some charge up, who cares? But here's also some more important stuff. Status ailment resistance up. She also gets that. She also gets status ailment resistance up, allowing her to ignore some status ailments. So between both Madoka and Kako, they both already have 25% status ailment resistance. Throw an Ultimate Madoka on there. Awesome. Amazing. They're not going to get hit by a whole lot of status ailments, and you'll be able to play your game. You also, interesting enough, get MP start 15% full, and this is 15% of whatever your maximum MP is, which if you're on Magia level 1 through 4, your maximum MP is 100, and it will be 15% of 100, which is 15. If you're on Magia level 5, or if you've got Doppel unlocked, you will be able to go to 200 MP, of course, and it takes 15% of 200 MP, which is 30. So you will start with 30 MP at the start of the battle if you have Magia level 5. Awesome. Which means that you'll be able to get to your Magia a lot faster, especially if you use both Madoka's and Kako's personals one turn after another. You're rolling in MP, so amazingly much MP, that from turn 2 and 3 onwards, you're already throwing around so much heal and survivability and everything. You're basically invincible. So if you play Madoka and Kako, what you have to do basically is you have to remove Homoda from your team or else she dies of jealousy. But more importantly, once you get both of their Magias out, you'll be stacking so much stuff in your favor that you basically become invulnerable in like turn 3 or whatever. It's amazing. All of this, by the way, of course, in PvE. None of this applies to PvP, because in PvP you're not going to get to Magia that fast with Excel Draw, because Excel Draw is an active, personal, and those are on a cooldown, so you can't use them, sadly. So you have to get there with just your regular discs, and you have to use Madoka Connect, which you might not get at Madoka Connect on turn 2 if you're unlucky, so it's a lot less powerful. You still can do some of that stuff. Like I said, Madoka is still used in Mirror's Ranking at some point. However, it's not nearly as reliable or powerful as it is in PvE. And her active just gives everyone a regenerate, which you can just use leading up to your Magia to survive the first few turns leading up to your Magia. It's not a whole lot. It's actually not a whole lot at all. It's rather weak, actually. But even so, it's something. Now that we've talked about all of these super defensive supports that keep your team alive but don't really do anything else, don't do much damage at all, let's talk about someone who actually does do some damage but can't play defensive at all. It's Ren. Oh my god, best girl. We have best girl right here. who is best girl, but more importantly, we're going to take a look at her because I've never done that. Her stats are rather interesting in that her defense is pretty bad, her HP is not that great, but her attack is actually pretty good. Her attack is actually really, really strong. So we can already see that she's supposed to be someone who's more offensive. Her type says Magia, and we're going to take a look at what makes her so special. Her connect, of course, gives attack up. It gives evade to the character you're connected to, which is some sort of defensive survivability option that you have. But it also gives chase, and of course it gives chase to the character you're connecting to. So if you want to make use of that chase, you have to then use other characters' discs so that that character can chase. Which isn't that great, but there are some cases where it can be quite alright to do that. However, overall though, her connect is nothing super special at all. Just keep in mind that the evade can be useful sometimes in some strategies where you have like Ren and Ren or whatever, like two characters that can both give each other evade. That can be pretty interesting. So because she has 2 Excel discs, she can get to Magia sometimes. I often played her on a blast team to support my blasters, which means I didn't get that to Magia that often. But of course you can play it just as well on a Magia team, and she will get to Magia, and her Magia is really interesting in that it has the sign, which means that this Magia deals more damage the lower your HP is. So the lower Ren's HP is, the more damage she will deal. And I think the maximum damage you deal if Ren is lower than 35% health, I think, which is critical health. So after critical health, which like I said, I think is 35% HP or less, you will deal the most amount of damage, which is actually quite absurd. If you look at those numbers, 1120 to 2188 for a double. Look at someone else's Magia, you'll see that 700 to 1600. So it deals like 500% more, 400% more on both cases, which is actually kind of absurd. Actually really, really powerful. However, of course, you have to be low HP and Ren dies fast. However, at least it sort of counteracts that by giving evade to Ren for a turn, which is awesome. But yeah, just keep in mind that in order to actually make full use of this Magia, you need to be on low HP. And it also gives a regenerate to self. It's not very strong, not very strong. At least a double, it's somewhat strong. I don't know, actually no, it's like 8%. It's like 8% here with Magia, which is fine. It's fine, but nothing that's going to keep you alive for too much longer, because you're going to use this Magia when you're on low HP, and when you're on low HP and 8% regenerate HP, it's not going to do a whole lot. Anyway, more importantly, her Spirit Enhancement, she has a whole bunch of extra nodes for double damage and Magia damage up, which is actually absurd, and then she gets more Magia damage up and more Magia damage up. Oh my god, she actually gets an absolutely absurd amount of Magia and double damage up, because she is supposed to be a Magia character. However, of course, her Magia is single target, so keep that in mind when you want to actually play her for her Magia. But she does do absolutely ridiculous amounts of double damage. She has some of the highest single target damage in the entire game, because she has so many double and Magia damage up nodes, and she does bonus damage when she's at low HP, focused all on a single tile, which can make her absolutely absurd if you play her on a Magia team for the single target burst. The reason why I like playing her, by the way, is because she does chase 20% here, and her active gives herself chase for 3 turns 45%. And these two are active at the same time and work independently of each other. You would say they stack multiplicatively. What this means is, when someone else attacks, you have a 20% chance to chase, and if that fails, you then also have a 45% chance to chase. So you have 2 separate chances to chase, which in total comes, if we combine those two, we get to like 55% chance to chase when someone else attacks, which is absolutely amazing. And this is why I usually say that Ren is more of a support, because she chases so goddamn often. Like in Mirrors, it happens really, really often. Like basically every single fight that I do in Mirrors, she was always there together with like Homoda or whatever. And Homoda would attack, the enemy would survive at like 25 to 30%, and then Ren would chase and kill the target. And I would do one-shots that way, and that was actually rather reliable. That happened like basically every single fight, that Ren would finish off weak targets with a chase. And that's what I think makes Ren so awesome as a support, if you want to play her as a support. Like I said, I played her in a blast team as that sort of support that just keeps coming in and chasing all the time, which is absolutely amazing. Also fogs all enemies, but it's only 40% chance, which is basically 0 against an ultimate Madoka, so who cares. It also doesn't do that much, but at least it can counteract some evades and make enemies miss sometimes, but overall it doesn't do much. So yeah, Ren has this really amazing ability to either support really well with her chases, keep chasing all over the place, especially in Mirrors, where you have a really high chase chance to keep finishing off weak targets, while also having the ability on a Magia team, if you can set it up correctly, to do absolutely absurd amounts of damage to single tiles, which makes her the best girl as a character. I mean, gameplay-wise, she's fine. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.